start? If I've never done this before with the humans I work with, how do I introduce this concept? The reality is that any kiddos that are native English speakers, English is their first language, they are carrying knowledge about morphology in their oral language. They already know it, they just don't have words for it. Little trickier for English as additional language learners. So where we start is with free bases, so words that by themselves we recognize as a word and that have no suffixing changes. So we're not toggling Y to I, we're not, dropping that single final non-syllabic E or that marker E, doubling that final consonant to maintain a short vowel sound. None of those things are happening. We're just wanting to introduce this concept to kiddos that we have this word, we add, which in itself is a morpheme, we add this other morpheme on it, and it modifies or changes the sense or the meaning of that word. Okay, that's where we start. Then when our kiddos have a good sense of that, and for some kids, that's one conversation or one 20-minute conversation where we look at the PLAY play family, and we talk about all the words we can think of that are in the play family and what the parts are that build those words, and they got it. Okay. Now we look at free base words. So again, on their own, we recognize it as a word, but now we have suffixing changes. So we are seeing that dropping of the single final non-syllabic E. We're seeing the doubling of that final consonant for a short vowel sound, like CVC words. We're looking at words where maybe we toggle the Y to I because it's moved from that final position to a medial position. So this is where we start introducing, we're leveling it up. Okay. And depending on your grade, this might be as far as you get. And that's totally fine. Then we blow their minds by telling them there's actually words where the base or the base element is what we call bound, in that we don't recognize it on its own. But once we add the prefix or the suffixes to it, now we recognize it as a word. So my favorite one happens to be in this list, which is IT as a bound base. So that's not to be confused with the word it as a function word. So it's IT, meaning go, EX, meaning out. You put the two together and we have the word exit, and it means to go out. The word transit is also part of that family. TRANS meaning across, IT meaning go. When you're transiting somewhere, you're going from one place to another. Then once we have a sense of what that looks like with some simple bound base words, now we get into more morphologically complex words where we might have two prefixes and two suffixes. We might have the base or the base element at the beginning of the word, and then it's followed by multiple suffixes after that. And then basically, once we get to that point, we just float amongst those levels of word building. But we definitely don't start with, overcompensating as the first word that we're going to study. We have a conversation that levels up to that place.
Charlie,
when I give you the,
oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Len.
I was just going to say, to add to that, I was with K-12 teachers this year at a school just recently last week, and I chose the Jory John book, like The Good Egg. Yeah. And help was our word. And it was interesting because even though the vocabulary is very simple, HELP, help, it was the meaning of the story. And many of those teachers at the upper level hadn't heard that story before. So they connected differently to it, right? So yes, it could be a morphology study book that we use. But the story that was read is actually what resonated with those teachers. And because many of them hadn't done morphology, actually choosing the word help was a good one to do.
Now, Lana introduced this segment of our little sideshow last year because she likes to watch me squirm, is really what this is about. So the hot seat is when Lana gives me a word, and then I try to do some word study in real time to model what it might look like. So go ahead, Lana. What's the word today?
Okay, well, it won't be a hard one, I don't think for you, because it was one that I played with this week with Mary Beth.
Mm.
But deciduous is your word.
Oh, I saw that one. That was a
Yes.
good one.
Yeah. But I liked it just because there was just so many pieces to it. And I think when we get into Edim Online, where you actually take the base study from, like, where do I even pick that, right? And I think we'll talk about that when you get into Edim Online, because, you know, when teachers are reading that entry, where do you get the word that you're actually going to include in the word some, right? When there's all these different Latin spaces in there. So I think it's something to talk about.
Yeah, and I'll make sure to include Mary Beth's little poster that she put
Yeah.
out on social
Yeah.
media, because she was comparing coniferous and deciduous trees. And coniferous is one of her favorite words because FER is a bound base that means to bear or carry. And the con part of coniferous is actually cone. And a coniferous tree is a cone bearing tree. Like, it all just comes together. So she was comparing that with deciduous. Now, this is, yeah, okay. So off the top of my head, when we're working with words, we start on the outsides and work our way in. And sometimes the parts are super clear, and then other parts we hit kind of muddy waters. So I think that the DE is a prefix in this word. It's one, like, I've seen it in other words. And so I'm pretty confident that I could put DE as a prefix. Now, what is the base? Not super sure. I'm a little like, but I'm pretty sure OUS is a suffix. So mentally, I'm putting OUS kind of off to the side. That leaves me with CIDU. Well, when we get to building out bound bases, it's not to say that couldn't be a bound base, but that looks kind of funny to me. And so I am going to guess, oops, wrong button, still wrong button, that the base element would be CIDE. Now, the reason I put the E on the end is because if it didn't have an E on the end, we would be doubling that D, like we'd be in a CVC kind of situation. And so I put the E on there because I don't see a double D in the final word. And I'm wondering if the U is acting as a connecting vowel letter, because sometimes U does that. Not often. And maybe once I go into digging in the kind of like where it comes from, I'm going to realize that that's not right at all. But that's my best guess to start. Now, you might have only gotten like DE is a prefix, and the rest of it, I'm not super sure on. So you just put this. That's totally fine. You might have also said, well, you know what? DE, yep, that's a prefix. I'm going to say that CIDU is the base, and then OUS, because I've seen OUS as a suffix in other places. The beautiful thing with doing this work with students is you can collect multiple hypotheses from them, and you're just inviting them to explain their thinking. So why do you think this is? And they explain it. And because we've built this world of curiosity and wonder, it's not about right or wrong. It's about, this is my thinking. Here's why I think what I think. Now let's go off and discover what we can discover. So we head up to our Edim online dictionary. Yeah, and Lana's pointing out here that talking through the word sums is what you would ask your students to do. So if I go in here, there's deciduous. And we have videos that explain how to use these references to how to read an online etymology dictionary entry, because it's not as easy as you would imagine. And I can also link to that resource as well. The more you spend in this resource, the easier it becomes. It's like anything, but there's still times where I hit things and I'm like, I have no idea what Doug is talking about here. That's okay. We learn what we can and then we revisit it when we need to know more. So we have it here as an adjective from the 1680s, reference to leaves, petals, teeth, etc. Teeth, that's gross. Loose teeth gross me out, I gotta say. Like, that's the one part of being a mom where I'm like, ugh. Falling off at a certain state of existence. Okay, from Latin, I can't speak Latin. That's the Latin word. That which falls down. From decidere, to fall off, fall down. From de, down, plus the combining form of cadere, to fall. So at any point, you could look up any one of these Latin words, but I like to go to the very end of where Doug Harper, by the way, is the guy who builds this website as a hobby. I kid you not. So I usually go to the end of where the Latin connections are for the words. And if I can't find that particular reference in the Latin dictionary, then I start digging into some of the other Latin words. Again, if you're new to morphology, at this point, stop listening because your brain is going to explode. However, if you're someone who's done some digging in and playing around with Latin and how it has informed our spelling system, then I am going to take this, Google Translate's helping me there. And I'm going to go over to my Latin dictionary. And here I see I see 4 verbs, conjugations. When we're working with Latin, we look at the second and the fourth. And when we look at the second and the fourth, we take off the past participle suffix, the US here from the fourth one, which would leave us with CAS, and I would add an E on the end for that same reason, because we don't see the doubling happening when we're using it in a word family. And then we have the CAD, and again, I'd add the E on the end. We take off the ERE. Now, that doesn't totally explain to us where the I comes from in deciduous. So I would come back here and I see here that it's got the CIDE there. So I'm going to look up this one and see where it takes me. So it doesn't have a fourth, but it does have, and we already know that DE is a suffix because he identified it in the entry, and we take off the ERE at the end because that's what we do with the in this second one, which would give me the CIDE. So it's all part of the cadere family, meaning to fall. And when we looked up cadere, there was a CASE, right? So I'm guessing the word cascade. Does the word cascade fit in this family? Yep. So there we go. It's from cadere, to fall. So if you want to know all of the assimilated bases that come from a particular Latin verb, it doesn't work on the phone app. It only works on the website, where you can take the Latin verb and put it in the box, and then it's going to show you all of the places where it's coming up. And you can see, like, here's another word, relapsed criminal, using the CID, and it would be an E, IVEIST, which I didn't even know was a word until right now. Coincident. So we've got, so anyways, if you want to fall down a rabbit hole, that's a beautiful rabbit hole to fall down. The way to think about this or explain it with your students, if you were so inclined, is think about a family reunion. Okay. So if I'm going to go to the Craig family reunion, my dad was one of 8 siblings. There will be 8 picnic blankets or picnic tables at this reunion. And my dad's family will sit at one. His siblings' families will all sit at other picnic blankets or picnic tables, but we all get to come to the Craig family reunion. So the word deciduous would get to come to the Cadere Latin reunion, but it would sit on a different blanket than the word cascade. That would be part of a different family connected to the same Latin root. Okay. I don't think I explained that as well as Mary Beth did, but that is where I got so far. Lan, what do you think?
I actually think when Mary Beth said it to me, when you're looking at the lat dick as an example,
Yeah.
when you're looking at which words do we look at? So I think it's the infinitive, which is the second one, and the supine, which is the fourth one.
Yeah.
That it's those two in that lat dick that tell us the English roots. So, those are the only two that we need to look at. You'll get better and better at it, I guess, dropping the end suffixes off, because you'll start to figure that out with Latin and what that looks like. But I don't know, when she said that it was those two that would explain where the English word has been derived from, that kind of clicked for me. So, yeah.
And sometimes, because some Latin verbs were like very prolific in their offering of bound bases that we use, the collection of associated bases attached with certain Latin verbs is like ridiculous. And so the looking up in the Latin dictionary gives us like the starting point. But if you really want to know where all the family members live, if you throw the Latin word into that search engine on the Edom Online and you see all of the ones that pop up, then you can start to go, oh, well, it's not just, FER to carry. It can also be FY and FIC and all these other ones that you don't necessarily get by looking at the Latin dictionary entry, but it's a place to start. We know that there's other subject areas out there, and if teachers are paying attention to the words they're using, sometimes taking them apart and seeing what the morphemes are in that word help us understand the task at hand or understand more about that particular word. So the one I picked for this month is compare and contrast. So English teachers use this all the time, but it also lives in other subject areas to compare and contrast. And they almost always are offered together as a set of verbs. But what exactly does that mean? So when we look at the word compare, I see COM as a prefix, PARE as some sort of a base, down base. And then when we read this arrow, we say is rewritten as COMPARE, compare. So then I look it up, and when I look at compare as a verb, it's first attested in the 1400s to regard or treat as equal. Early 15th century, liken, make comparison, represent as similar, from Old French, from Latin, from COM, meaning with or together. So Doug has said, yep, that's a prefix. And then I thought this was super cool. From plus par, meaning equal. Because when we ask students to compare, we're asking them to find similarities. And so then, of course, because anything that's bolded inside of an entry, Doug will tell you he never puts links in unnecessarily. So follow the links that are inside the entry. So when I click on par, it's an actual Latin word, par, meaning equal, equal sized, well, match, which this is at this moment, I have this light bulb that when you get par and you're golfing, you've matched up the amount of strokes it's supposed to take you. It's equal. The amount of strokes it's taking you is equal to the amount they said it should take you. And the golf sense of par is first attested in 1898. So in the great scheme of words, like that's not super old. But I thought that was really interesting. Where did the E come from? Well, if I go back here, if I was looking, sorry, folks, if I was just looking at the COMPARARE and I looked that up, I would take off the ARE part of that verb, which would leave me with par. But we don't have a doubling, and I know it's spelt with an E on the end. So I would put an E on the end to make PARE the base. Now, some people would write this that the base would be PAR and then in brackets put the E, meaning that sometimes it's PAR and sometimes it's PARE. Whatever floats your boat. Like these are not things that I lose sleep over. So do what makes sense for you. And, you know, the running theme of our work is do the best with what you know. And then when you know better, you revisit your thinking and you do better. It's as simple as that. So I've got compare meaning together and equal. Okay. So then I put this in with little asterisks because I knew this wasn't right. But I couldn't see how else this word might be made. And so CON as an assimilated form of COM, and then a base element of TRAST, but I couldn't actually think of other words that would be using that as a base. So at this point, I was pretty stumped. I zip over to my online dictionary and I type in contrast, and here's what I've got. From the 1690s, to set in opposition, show differences. And that's what we do when we ask kids to compare contrast. Comparing is the similarities, contrasting is the differences. That's why we usually slap them together. But this is where the mind gets blown. So it's actually built from CONTRA, meaning against, plus stare, to stand. So in contrast, you're looking for the things that are standing against those differences, the thing that you're comparing. But okay, let's look at stare for a second, to stand, because this is where when we start to do this work and we really get into it, we realize that there is some really interesting stuff that happens to us with Latin. So when we look at the second one, which is the infinitive, we're supposed to take off the ARE. So that leaves us with ST. If I look at the fourth one, we're supposed to take off the US or the UM if that's at the end. So we take that off. And then we're supposed to take off the stem suffixes, which is the AT. So once again, I'm left with ST. That's the base. So bases don't have to have vowels in them. In fact, there are some bases that are a single letter, but this is a case of a base being two letters, and those two letters are an S and a T. So we have CONTRA meaning against, and the ST as a bound base meaning to stand. And when we're contrasting ideas, when we're finding those differences, we're standing against, we're looking in opposition. Now, I lent out my book that has like the crazy matrices that, like, if you're new to morphology, you don't want to look at because it'll make you cry. But I know there is a page that has the ST base meaning to stand. And again, you can type in the Latin verb into the Adam Online Dictionary and see all of the bases that are all the words that are connected, where old me would have seen the ST and been like, well, that's a grapheme. And it makes, it's a blend, right? Is that what we call it, Lana? Consonant blend?
Yep.
Isn't that great? I would never have identified it as a base element. Now I know better, I know more, and here we are, ST as a base. Inspiration is everywhere, and Lana and I truly believe that, like, once you get into this work, you can't listen to a song, read a book, hear a conversation. At a moment, I want you to open up your chat box. What are some words or some concepts that could be inspired by this fall themed GIF or GIF, depending on your emphasis, of this falling down the page? So, what are some things you could explore with your students just by looking at the image on the screen? Tumbling, autumn versus fall. Yep. Changing. Now, you both have given me words that have ing endings. So maybe I'm going to look at a whole bunch of words that have ing at the end as a suffix. And when we have an ing in the word, is it always a suffix? Or are there times when we have an ing in the word and it's just the letters, ing? Lana thinks of the word colorful. Well, you could do an investigation about why sometimes some places spell it with a U and some places spell it without a U, and who's to blame for that? No Webster, in case you're wondering. So we can talk about the word season, seasonal. What else is in that word family? Couple of the top of my head, comparing things. So some of the leaves in this GIF are bigger than other leaves. One of the leaves here is the biggest. I might find a series of gourds, pumpkins, something out of the harvest. There's an EST word. Is the EST in harvest a comparative? What's it doing in there? I don't know. I actually haven't looked that one up, but I'd be curious to know. Maybe I like to build a pile of leaves and jump in them. So I'm actually going to look at the JUMP family. Maybe I want to look at the change family and think of all the words that might be part of that and brainstorm and build them and talk about them and use them in sentences. Symmetrical. Awesome. There's a word. Let's talk about it. Let's study it. Let's see what it says and means. So we can find inspiration absolutely anywhere. We all have a classroom read aloud novel that's on the go, a collection of seasonal picture books that we've got set out for whatever theme we're doing, some sort of text that we're using in a given subject area. All of those things are places that we can find words to study. Once your kids have a structure or a process that they can use, you can get them to pick any word they want to go check out. Oh, this is a good one. Leaves, as in the plural of leaf, versus leaves, as in going away. Let's look at the two comparisons. Do they have some sort of connection historically where they veered? We know that typically English words are spelled the way they are to convey meaning in written text. So what about those words that are spelled the same but have different meanings? How do we build understanding using the context of the sentence to help us understand that? Because that's part of that's a part of communicating in text, right? So you could literally go in any direction from a GIF to help you do some study. Now, if you're still stuck and wondering what this could look like, I've put some resourcing in here for you. So this it's hyperlinked inside the slide deck. So this one here is going to take you to this lady's website. It's a free download, and they're all Halloween words. Now, this does not mean that you print this off and give it to your kids as a booklet, because no one thinks that's fun. But you could pick one of the things and talk about it and do some brainstorming and then put the matrix up that she's got for zombie or monster or ghost or skeleton. I would pair it with, like, if I was young enough, some sort of goofy sing-along song or a seasonal poem or some sort of book you've read. But there's lots of stuff in there. All the words are related to Halloween. Now, you may or may not be familiar with Engage with the Page, but it's a collection of picture books that Fiona Hamilton and friends post pretty regularly, I think weekly. different things that you can do with any particular book. It'll give you a little blurb about the story. These little things give you activities that you can do. So here's how we look into the letters of dark. This one here is looking at compound words. This one here is looking at fright and the words that are in the word family. This one is looking into the words of skeleton. And so you click on any one of these. Here's an activity you could do with some of the words. Now, some of these are going to be more primary based than others, just because that's the lens that Fiona and her friends work in, that pre-K to 2 probably. But that doesn't mean you can't use it with the big kids, because the big kids like picture books too. So you can use those as inspiration. For anyone that's looking for something for a little bit older kids, but is seasonal, the Simpsons retelling of Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven is my fave. I don't even know if kids know who the Simpsons are anymore, but you can introduce them to the cultural phenomenon of the Simpsons. This is also hyperlinked to the actual poem. But what I would do is I'd give them a print copy of the poem. I'd put Lisa as narrating, and Bart is the Raven, and Homer's the guy telling the story about Lost Lenore, and have them collect at least 5 interesting words that they hear. It's an old poem, so there's some old words in there. And then I've linked here a document that they can use for word study. And you're allowed to make a copy and edit this and do whatever you'd like with it. But essentially, we're asking the students to think about the words that they've collected. So of the 5 words you've collected, you're going to pick one and you write it here. Then you put in the word sum, how you think it's built. Then you're going to visit Edum Online, and it's hyperlinked there. What are some notes that you've learned about the word? What other words are in the family? Now, if you've never done this with your students before, this is not the kickoff lesson. However, if your kiddos have some understanding around morphology and you're looking for something seasonal to do with them, as the wheels fall off next week, as Halloween approaches and or is the day that they're at school, this is an activity that you could make use of for your kiddos.